Hello, writers, and welcome to the Researchers Writing Podcast. This podcast is for all your researchers in the sciences who want to write papers in a structured and time efficient way so you can get published in top tier journals at a calm and steady pace. In this podcast, we talk about how we can write papers that are clear, concise, and compelling, and how to make the process of writing less hard. My name is Dr. Anna Clemens, and I am an academic writing coach with a PhD in chemistry. In the Researchers Writing Academy, my online program, I've helped hundreds of researchers get their papers published in their target journals using a streamlined writing process. If you want to succeed in your academic career, mentor your students effectively, and have your research make an impact in the world, you are in the right place. Let's get into it. Hello, writers. Well, welcome back to the Researchers Writing Podcast. I'm excited today because I am going to share another interview with you with a member of the Researchers Writing Academy. And this time I'm sharing this conversation I had with Dr. Jennifer Grant Weinandy, who is a very treasured member of the Researchers Writing Academy. She has been a member for years. Um, and we were joking about it during the conversation, how actually the Researchers Writing Academy has kind of seen her son grow up. He's now a toddler. And back the first time when I met Jenny, I still remember how she was holding him to her chest when he was a little baby. So that's really fun. Let me tell you a bit more about Jenny. Well, Dr. Jenny Grant Weinandy, she's a clinical psychologist and assistant professor researching addiction. Jenny will talk a bit more about her research later. She is based at Ohio University in the US. Um, Jenny is in this conversation talking about why she decided to take the Researchers Writing Academy and how first she was super motivated and then she kind of stopped taking the course. So we were talking about how she then realized, oh, I have to finish taking the course and what she did to do that really effectively and really, yeah, how she made time to watch the course lesson and how that then made really changed her writing, really changed the way she was writing papers. And we also talk about the last paper that she got published, and the whole process of how she was writing that, how she was deciding on the target journal, what the peer review process was like, etc. We're also sharing a link to that paper in the show notes if you're interested. And if you, after this conversation, um, want to learn more about Jenny and maybe want to work with her. She's always basically looking for students, she told me after the conversation. We're also sharing her lab website and her social media handles with you in the show notes. So check that out. And yeah, super. Looking forward to hearing what you think about this conversation, what your takeaways are. It's always, such a pleasure to talk to members of the Researchers Writing Academy, and I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did when talking to Jenny. So have fun. Hello, Jenny. Thank you so much for joining me today. We
Yeah.
already had a little giggle before recording because I had to check that we were really recording because that's apparently really hard for me to do. Well, I'm super excited, Jenny, that you are joining me today. You're such a valued member of the Researchers Writing Academy, and you've
Oh,
been
thank you.
with us for years, and now you have a bit of a special role as a superscribe, which are our community ambassadors. And yeah, would you want to just introduce yourself, tell people what your research is about, anything you want to share?
Sure, sure. My name's Jenny Grant Weinandy. I am trained as a clinical psychologist. And I'm currently an assistant professor in psychology at Ohio University, which is in Ohio, like right in the Appalachian foothills. So we have lots of mountains. It's very pretty.
Mm.
Um, my research is really focused on mixed methods, so using quantitative and qualitative methods and kind of combining them and um, looking at how culture impacts how people think about and experience addiction. So right now that's meaning looking at the barriers to care for those with gambling problems,
Mhm.
particularly in rural areas. And really, our research is trying to reduce health disparities and increase access to care more generally. Um, what else do you want to know about me, Anna?
No, that sounds great. Thanks.
Okay.
If people want to know
Oh,
more,
I'm
they
also,
can.
I should actually, I will add this bit. I am a mom of now two, and Anna lovingly has watched me raise at least my first one and be pregnant with my second basically the whole time I've been in the Researchers Writing Academy. So it's an
Yeah.
important note.
Yeah, it's funny because the first memory I have of you, Jenny, is you being in a call inside the program, having Arthur, your first son, kind of cradling him, having him.
Mhm.
He was there on the call.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
now he's
Oh,
big. Yeah,
snuggle,
it's funny.
snuggle the babies. Now he's much bigger.
Yeah. Cool. Well, maybe actually we go back then, maybe
Mhm.
even before you joined the program. Do you or could you outline a little bit or paint a picture of how writing papers was for you before you joined? Like sort of what did that look like for you and what did you struggle with when it came to writing?
Yeah, so I will say when I started, I was a PhD student, so my writing looked a little bit different to what it does now, obviously.
Mm,
Um, so I was just at the end of my PhD. I was, I believe, just starting writing my dissertation. And I had just had my first kid too, and I
mm,
was feeling super overwhelmed and lost in general. Um, so I'll start out with like how I felt about my writing. I didn't feel good about it. I think I didn't see myself as a writer. It was just like this was something that I had to do. And part of this was grad school. I was just felt like just something, another thing I had to do, another chore on the checklist. Didn't feel great about it. And because of that, I would often like avoid writing for periods of time and then be like, all right, I gotta write today because
mm,
if something's due to my advisor probably tomorrow. So I would like spend the whole day writing. Um, and it just like it didn't feel good. The other thing I would do is I would start at the quote start of a paper, like
mm,
the intro, and I would just try and go through the whole thing. So introduction, then methods, then results, then discussion. And I'd slowly write it through. And the introduction would feel awful because I was just like desperately trying to work out my ideas as I was writing.
mm,
Um, and to a degree, it worked in that like the story always came together.
mm,
And eventually I got stuff done. It's not like I hadn't written anything by that point, but it just didn't feel good. I didn't feel confident. Um, it didn't feel balanced. And then also it just like felt like a slog. Like I just didn't
mm,
want to do it, which is why I avoided it for so long.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. How did you then decide to join the Researchers Writing Academy? Do you remember?
I remember this, as you said, I had Arthur. So I think he was pretty young. I want to say like 3 months old at the point when I joined because I remember listening. I think I was actually like on one of your outreach free program calls at one point, maybe through Kathy Mazak. I'm trying to remember who. Um,
Mm,
but I remember watching and going like, huh, this feels like it's a process that might make things easier. And I feel super overwhelmed. I don't really know what I'm doing. I need something a little bit more, I don't want to say concrete, but like something a little bit more clear. I need a clearer roadmap. I'm already
Mm.
feeling overwhelmed. I have a semi-newborn. Um, I don't feel good about what I'm doing, and she's suggesting that there might be a way to make this easier and feel better. And you know
Mhm.
what? That sounds good. Why don't we do that? And I do remember having this like thought of um, what does that like? Is this really worth it? Am I sure that I want to do this? Um, but yeah, so that was kind of where I was going in my head.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, well, I'm really, really glad that you decided it was worth it, and
Me
decided
too.
to join us.
It's been
Um,
great.
fantastic. Do you want to talk a little bit about what has changed for you since you joined the Researchers Writing Academy? Like how you were describing earlier that you would kind of procrastinate on writing and then kind of write, like just like force yourself close to a deadline to get it all down and write your paper from the introduction, starting with the introduction, just down to the conclusions. How did that all change?
So I think what was the first module, but I think is now a different module, but or is going to be a different module. But basically, there's a module in there that you talk about um, being a writer and thinking of yourself as a writer and like kind
Hmm.
of that frame of mind. Honestly, I did that one first, um,
Hmm.
because it was the first one,
Hmm.
and that helped a lot in that I I was like, oh yeah, I loved writing. When I was a kid, I used
Oh,
to
interesting.
write books. Like I mean, they were
Wow.
8-year-old books,
Uh-huh.
so they were like, but they would have chapters,
Wow.
and I would present these to my parents, and like I loved writing, and I didn't feel like I was a writer anymore. I didn't feel like I was
Huh.
good at it.
Uh-huh.
I felt like I was okay, like I got by. And so
Mm.
that reminded me to go back to that, like, okay, well, what did I like about writing? How can
Mm.
I make that happen again? So that was one part. And then the key story elements was the other part that was super helpful in that it was just like, okay, now I have a mind map. Now I know where I'm starting.
Mm.
Um, so that I know kind of the story before I try and write. And
Hmm. Hmm.
that was huge. And I think now I'm not so scared about going back to writing. I feel more confident because I have that, like, no, I am a writer and I like writing.
Mm.
Um, and I have my cup of tea when I write.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and so that helps. And
Mm.
so I have routines with it now, and it's
Mm.
part of my day, and it's something I enjoy, and I know what I'm going to do next because I had a plan. Um, so that has made a big difference, I think.
Mm.
Yeah,
Oh, that's so
I'm less
interesting.
anxious.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, amazing. And you have been very productive as well. As I had the
Thank you.
privilege to witness, you have consistently written throughout your time since we've known each other, written and published. Do you want to share a bit about that? Like, yeah, any like maybe like specific concrete successes you've had, any wins since you started being a member?
Yeah, let me think. I wrote um, a paper that was recently published on what I call anticipated motives for seeking gambling treatment.
Mm.
Basically, the idea of it was trying to understand why people who are not currently in gambling treatment and maybe don't think that they have problems, like what would it take for them to go seek treatment if they had a problem in the future? It's sort of like from a prevention mindset.
Mm.
Um, so that's my research background, and that's kind of where I was.
Mm.
And I use the key story elements first to kind of map that out. And I actually sent that to the academy to, I think I did it on a call on one of our group calls, and Anna lovingly supported me in like changing it and making it make more sense. And then I sent it to my co-author and they sent it back to me with their edits. And then I'm pretty sure I also then sent it back to Anna or like did something else in the community where I
Mm,
got even more feedback. And then I used that as my basis for writing my paper. And just like within the program, I started outlining the different sections, so results and then intro and so on, and went through the whole process and submitted it. And the first journal I submitted to, I got a revise and resubmit, which was good. And it was pretty minor revisions, to be honest.
mm,
Um, I think they were more stylistic for the
mm,
reviewers than anything. It was
mm.
just more like these
Interesting.
particular reviewers like these things, and you're like, okay, I'll
Okay.
change that. That's fine. Whatever. Um, which happens. I think like I feel revise and resubmits are kind of a win because you're like, okay, I got somewhere with something.
100%.
Um,
Yeah.
so so that was good, and it got published earlier this year. Um, in the Journal of Gambling Studies, if anyone is interested in reading it. Um,
Yeah. Congratulations. We'll put a link in the show notes. So if people are interested, they can have a look.
yeah, yeah. So it was a really good process in that I didn't avoid. I kept going through, even, and that was even while I was transitioning into my assistant professor role. So like
Right.
as I was transitioning jobs, I was still able to keep this up. I think because I had a plan and because I'd mapped things out, like I was
Mm,
able to keep up on it.
mm.
So yeah, that was helpful.
Nice. Well, it sounds like a pretty smooth process, writing that paper. I mean, I really love that you went to your courses and had like got feedback on like the key story elements. That's something I like really recommend doing. Like, because we give feedback in the program, but really having like authors agree what the story should be before you actually write the paper, like I think it's so, so important because otherwise you anyway will go back and edit it because then someone says, oh,
Right.
but I
And you don't
think you
want to
should
get
have done
too
it
far.
like
You don't
that.
want to have like written a paper and then be like, okay, now I have to go back and rewrite. That feels
Exactly,
bad.
exactly. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's what I think makes the process so frustrating, is when you have written a whole draft and then you go back and you're like, oh, and now I have to rewrite it. Um, so amazing. Um, how did you decide on your target journal? Like, do you want to share any like considerations you had there? Was that like difficult um to decide on one, or was it pretty straightforward in that case?
Um, I'm trying to remember how I decided this one. I always hate deciding journals.
I think most researchers do.
Yeah,
It's
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 like
weirdly
not
tricky.
it's oddly tricky, and I always find like it's hard to work out. Like I have this like these are some journals that I think are typically good for my research,
Mm,
because they're related in some way. So I tend to look at those first, because I know that they might be related. But I actually just put like I put my key story elements, my brief synopsis piece into an abstract finder, like a journal finder, um,
mm,
on several different websites and just kind of map them all out. And I literally Googled my like keywords essentially and being
hmm
like, oh,
hmm
gambling and motives and so I was
hmm
like Googling that and like journal
hmm
um for the list, and then I kind of created that list of different journals and then went through for each one. I was looking at impact factor, but actually more than that, I was looking at the types of articles they've most recently been. So I looked at them like most recent issues and
mm,
the types of articles they were most recently publishing. And part of that is I do research on behavioral addictions, and I sometimes publish in addiction more generally journals, and
Mm.
sometimes general addiction journals don't like behavioral addictions,
Oh, interesting.
or they don't really publish them as much because it's
Mm.
not substance use.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so I have to be kind of careful on looking out for that.
Mm.
And so I try to kind of go through them and look at those and see what papers kind of match vaguely what I'm talking about, because then I figure the editor is interested in those topics.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And it seems like you chose the journal well because, as you said, the peer review process was relatively easy
Hmm.
and you didn't have to change very much at all about
Right.
your study, about your paper.
Yes. Thankfully.
Are you unsure whether enrolling in the Researchers Writing Academy, my online program, would be the right next step for you? Then, if you're not quite sure, I highly, highly, highly recommend you to take my free introductory training. There, you'll get the bird's eye view of what the journal publication formula, that's my step by step system to write clear and concise papers, really is. So just type in researcherswritingpodcast.com/free and get access to that free training right away. So type in researcherswritingpodcast.com/free and access your training. Let's get back to the episode. Amazing. Um, when you started taking or becoming a member of the Researchers Writing Academy and then taking the course, the journal publication formula, how did you approach all that? So how did you make time to watch course lessons, engage in the program, etc.?
So, and this is probably characteristic of most things that I do. I was super invested at the start, and then I ran out of time. So, and I had to reorganize. So essentially, I was like, okay, I bought this thing, so I'm gonna do it. And I sat down and did a couple of modules. I think I did two modules pretty quickly, and was like, okay, I'm gonna start going with this. That's fine. And then after doing those two modules, I kind of stopped planning any time for it and
Mm,
inevitably didn't do any more for a little bit
mm,
because I didn't block that time out.
mm.
Um, which I'm pretty sure was something you said not to do earlier on in the program. But there we go.
It happens,
I
yeah.
didn't listen. And yeah, and so I kind of like didn't do any for a while. And as I was writing, I was like, wait, I don't really know what I'm doing next. Oh, I guess I didn't keep watching this. That's on me. And so I was like, okay, I need to restart. And so I took some time to stop and plan. And I think you were doing some like planning type call at the same time
Hmm.
as it happened.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay, maybe I'll go on the planning call and I'll just take some time to like plan out
Mm.
when I'm going to do this. And that was helpful because then I actually had times blocked for that. I think I ended up doing 1 to 2 hours a week, depending on how heavy my week was and what else I was doing.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, 1 to 2 hours a week. And then I was actually writing notes on what I was doing. So I have like a Word document where I've written in my own words, um, what, yeah, what the videos were saying. And that helped kind of internalize that,
Mm.
for me at least. Um, so I watched those videos, and after I watched the videos, um, that felt a lot better, and I felt like I could go back and actually do some of this stuff. But I was writing my dissertation at the same time, and so
Right.
some of it was going on. Dissertation writing is weird with the journal publication formula though, because you have to write your introduction and methods before you write your results and discussion,
Mm.
because you have to do we have to, at least here in the US, you have to propose it, which means you have to
Hmm.
write your introduction and methods.
Mm. Mm.
Um, but what I did do was like mapped out kind of like, here's what I think my results will look like. So kind of my hypotheses, right? I
Mm,
like did the results, and then this
mm,
is what I think the implications would be
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
for the discussion, sort of like mapped it out like that. And that
That's
kind of
really
helped.
smart. Yeah, that's really smart.
It's like a what if
Mm,
situation, but
yeah, yeah,
at
yeah,
least then it helped me think through the story
yeah,
a little bit more.
yeah. Oh, that's such a good way to do it. Huh.
Mm.
Cool. And when you say you blocked out times, did you have like a regular day in the week where you were like, oh, this is like time for taking the course? Or was it just like every week you were deciding kind of on your weekly plan and you were just trying to find an hour or two?
Initially, it was an hour or two, but I will say even now, I've obviously gone through the program now at this point, but I still have I have on Friday, every Friday for at least an hour. I have like a miscellaneous block too, but at least an
Oh,
hour I have a professional development hour where I
oh,
like
nice.
set this time aside to do whatever. And so like if I take a course, I put that time in there. So this would like if I was to go back and redo the course, it would go in that like
Mm,
time slot. But like I always have this time on a Friday afternoon because I'm tired and I don't really want to like do proper thinking on a Friday afternoon.
hmm
So so I do
Fair enough.
coursework on that time.
No,
Yeah. So that
it's
and
very
that's
smart.
helped.
Yeah, cool,
Yeah.
cool. Also, I was very impressed when you told me this. I asked you once what you did to make sure that you actually kind of committed to the course. And you told me that you wrote down kind of your like why you are taking the course. Do you want to talk a bit about that? Because I think that's such a amazing strategy, to help
Yeah.
remind yourself like what is your overall goal with taking this and thinking through that.
Yeah. So again, I'm a clinical psychologist by training, so I do therapy.
Hmm.
And my one of the things that I always do with my clients or with people I work with is talk about SMART goals,
Mhm.
setting SMART goals. And part of setting a SMART goal is making sure that it's relevant to you. And so I try, if I'm doing something, I try to make it relevant to me. Like why should I bother doing this? Um, because otherwise I do what I did, which is just kind of let it fall away and
Mm.
don't keep going with it. Um, I also use Trello, so I have different cards for different days and what I'm doing, and it looks like a bit of a mess, but it's got an organization to it. Um,
Mine looks like that
so
too. I think if anyone else would look at that, would go like,
yeah,
what?
anyone else looking at it gets very overwhelmed. My poor students look at it every so often, they're like, "What is going on here?" Um, but But yeah, so I use Trello, and basically I have a card for, or I had a card for the course. And so it was like Researchers Writing Academy. And then at the top, there's like a little description section. So I had like my reasons to do this, like
hmm
why, my
hmm
why. Um, and I wrote these down so that I could actually share them with people. Okay, my reasons were this is going to help me be a better mentor so I can support the success of my students, because I really care about taking care of my students and making sure that they can learn.
mm
And even as a graduate student, I knew at the time that this is kind of where I wanted to go. I wanted to go into academia,
hmm
and I was supporting students um, who were earlier on in the program. And so that was meaningful. And then, so that was one reason. Another one was this is going to help me streamline my writing so I can spend more time with my family. Again,
mm
I had a 3 month old. And so
hmm
family time was super important. And I wanted to make sure I was doing that.
mm
And so I needed anything I could to make it so that I was spending the least amount of time writing as possible in many ways and just being as efficient as possible so that I could really spend time with my family.
mm
Um, so that was helpful. And then the third reason was this is going to help me write more clearly so I can make more of an impact in my field and feel more confident in my jobs plural because I had no idea what I was doing at that point. Because
Hmm.
again, I was a grad student. Um, so I care that my work impacts people. Like the point of my research is I want to reduce barriers to care. I want to have an impact. And so if I can write clearly, then people are more likely to actually listen or
Mm.
read. Because that's part of how you communicate. And so I needed to be able to communicate really clearly so that people can understand what I'm saying.
Mm. Oh, I love these
So yeah.
schools. I love these schools. They
Thanks.
really also capture really well what we're trying to do in the Researchers Writing Academy, because this kind
Oh,
of
thank you.
the three things I'm always like kind of talking about. So I'm really glad that these were from the beginning the kind of the goals you had in mind. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I really love this approach. Maybe we should include, I was just thinking as you were talking, maybe we should include this somewhere in the course at the beginning as like a recommendation for people to do, because it really does make a difference knowing
Yeah,
why something you are doing is meaningful. Because, yeah, as you said, like the shine kind of wears off sometimes, right? Like at first
right.
we're super excited when we buy something and we're like, oh,
Mhm.
let's do it. Let's use the lessons, use the content, engage, and then kind of it wears off. And that's like totally natural. Like that I think happens to everyone with everything, more or less.
Right.
But then having these top of mind, these reasons why this is meaningful and why it's worth pursuing, and then, getting to the state where actually we can
Mhm.
unlock all the like, well, all the good that's on the other side, like feeling so
Yeah.
much better about your writing, and writing actually feeling much smoother and easier, and having more time for your family and all the things.
Yeah. It made a huge difference, I think. And I should say that I did this piece on that second time when I like
Uh-huh.
re-planned out, not when I initially did it and had
Okay.
that new toy experience and stopped. So the reasons were helpful the second time round when I actually did them.
Amazing, amazing. Um, what do you like the most about the Researchers Writing Academy? Like we have quite a few like kind of bits and pieces. Like we have the journal publication formula, which is the online course, and then we have a community, and we have different types of calls. Like you mentioned, the planning call that we do every quarter. We have like kind of feedback calls. Um, we have like accountability inbuilt. We have co-writing sessions, writing retreats, all the things. Like if you had to pick a couple, or I don't know, as many as you like what kind of resonated the most with you?
I think that's a hard question because I think it's depended on where I've been at and what I've been doing.
Mm,
So like right now I'm really loving the writing sprints, but that's partly
mm.
because I've been thoroughly enjoying like helping out with them. So um so right now that's my exciting thing.
Mhm.
It's my new toy, I guess. Um
The new shiny thing.
the new shiny thing. So that's super exciting right now. But I think when I first started, the key story elements was like one of the big things for me
Mm,
that was like an aha moment that sort of
mm,
like helped me clarify things and make things a lot more clearer in my own head.
mm,
And so I think that would be like, this is a really, really helpful part.
mhm,
I think the other part is just having a community on there that I love that there's a parent space because I was a new parent and I love
mm,
that there was a space to talk about that and
mm,
just that people actually respond. Like I would put on, hey, I need these, I need some feedback on this key story elements or something. And people will actually like respond and be like, oh, here's what I think, or here's some
mm,
suggestions, whether that's Anna or also just like people more generally in the community. And
mm,
I think that's really special that that's a
mm.
thing. So I applaud you for creating that space. But just that like people are willing to help. I think in
Mm,
general, people are pretty nice and try and be helpful to
mm,
each other, but having
mm,
that space where you can kind of ask for that and it not be evaluative and no
mm.
one's gonna care, for lack of a better term, if
Yeah,
your
yeah.
writing isn't great. They're
Mm.
just there to support you. So I think that's really nice.
Mm. Oh, lovely. Yeah, this community is really special to me
Mhm.
because I also do think it's such a nice space. And it's always so hard to say it because I always feel like people aren't going to believe me when I say it's actually a really supportive community because I feel like, oh, everyone's saying that. And I also say, no, but people really, really care. And they're really like,
Mhm.
lots of comments are so thoughtful. And yeah, yeah, I think, yeah, I'm really proud of it. And I'm glad
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. And anytime anyone's like, oh, I got this thing or I got my paper published or whatever, like
Mm,
there's always tons of like likes and like, congratulations, you did the thing. Yay.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
really nice too.
yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's because I mean, this is one of the things that are really important to me is having having our members celebrate things and having them actually enjoy successes, because this is something I struggle with myself and that I struggled with even more when I was in academia, because I always felt like there was no space for that. And it was kind of not, at least in the environment I was in, not really encouraged, I guess,
Yeah, it's
as
always like move
much.
on to the next thing. Like, what are
Exa
you doing next? Okay, you
yeah,
got a grant in, move on. What are you gonna write next? Okay, you got a
yeah.
paper done, write the next one.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we have it so internalized, and I think it's such a shame. And I think it's really, I mean, you're just like on a hamster wheel then. Like you'll never, it'll never feel good if you just keep being in that hamster wheel and just the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. So yeah, no, I'm glad. I'm glad the community can like be a small part of that. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, we want to, in the future, we actually currently restructuring the community a bit, like kind of expanding a little bit on some things. And you already know a few of the details. And one thing we want to do is like give like celebrations their own like space. So kind of hopefully encouraging that even more so that people know, well, there is a dedicated space to celebrate and to share anything good that happened.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm so excited.
Me too. That's gonna be good. Um, who would you recommend joining, or would you recommend others to join? I just guessed that you would.
Yes. Yes, I would recommend. I think there's many people. I would say like it doesn't matter where you are in terms of your career position. I think it could be helpful regardless of whether you're like a PhD student like I was, like an assistant professor. I think if you're later on, that's fine too. I haven't gotten there yet, but I believe that that would be helpful. Because I think it's helpful, especially if you're feeling lost or feel like you've lost confidence in your writing. It's just like that not feeling good anymore.
Mm,
Um, and that could happen later on as well, right? Like you've been doing this for many, many years now, and I'm now done.
mm,
um, so I think that it's helpful just to have a process to go through so that you're not feeling overwhelmed about what you got to do next, but also so you feel comfortable and confident of like, this is what I'm going to do next. And you can feel excited about what you're going to do next. Because
mm,
if you know where you're going next, you can be like, oh, I'm going to do this part next. And
mm.
because of the journal publication formula, now when I get to my discussion section, I'm like super invested in writing all about my implications because I'm
Cool.
like, this is so important. And here's why.
Oh, I love it.
And because I've been thinking about it, and
Mm,
but before I hadn't been, and I think that's kind of notable. So really, anyone, if you're feeling lost, if you're feeling a lack of confidence, if you feel like you don't know what you're doing next, and you just don't feel good about your writing, this could be helpful for you just to kind of create this space to allow you to do that.
mm. Lovely,
Yeah.
lovely. Is there anything else that I haven't asked that you would like to add?
Um, Oh, I think the only thing that I would add is now. as an assistant professor, I've noticed I've been using this with my students a lot more,
Hmm.
and I teach my students the key story elements,
Nice.
and share that with them. But I think it's really helped them in like understanding how to not just write a paper, but also read a paper. Which is
Mm.
interesting in that like now
Mm.
they'll look for the different key story elements within a paper, which I think is
Mm.
great.
Yeah,
Um,
fantastic.
and so they're like evaluating papers better and it's helping them
Mm.
critique. So I think this is helpful. This is helpful on a personal level, or has been helpful on a personal level for me and just in terms of writing, but I think it's really helped my teaching and mentoring as well in a way that
Mm.
I wanted, but wasn't necessarily expecting quite as much as has happened.
Mm. Amazing.
Oh,
Oh, that's
thanks.
so great to hear. I'm glad for your students too. They have you as a mentor.
I hope they feel that way.
I'm sure they do. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Jenny. This has been such a joy talking to you, and thank you for being such a great member, and for all your support in the Researchers Writing Academy. It's so
Anytime, I
fun
love
working
being
with
there.
you.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks.
Thanks, Anna.
If you would like to submit a question for me to answer on the podcast, please head to researcherswritingpodcast.com/question. That's researcherswritingpodcast in one word.com/question. And if you enjoyed this podcast episode, it would really mean the world to me if you could review it in your favorite platform, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whichever app you're using. The more reviews a show has, the more likely it will be shown to others who are looking for podcasts in the academic writing space. So thank you.